Our chief White House correspondent, Hallie Jackson, stuck around for us. Chris Wilson is a GOP pollster who's worked for Texas politicians, including George W. Bush and Ted Cruz, who we'll be talking about here in just a moment. Betsy Woodruff here in the flesh, MSNBC contributor and politics reporter for the Daily Beast, which is, by the way, 10 years old. Did you know that? More on that maybe later as well. Dana Milbank, political columnist for the Washington Post. There in Washington. Dana, next time we'll buy you a plane ticket or a train ticket so you can come and join the party. Ms. Jackson, let's start with you here. So the president clearly thinks that these midterms are all about him.
Well, all you have to do is look to what he said at all these rallies, as you just laid out in that great graphic here, when he says a vote for X candidate in the Republican Party is actually a vote for me. He has latched himself to the midterms, but what he did over the last 24 hours is try to distance himself, because I think he has a better understanding now than he did months ago that it is an uphill battle historically for a president, a sitting president, for his party to make gains in the midterms the way the president wants to see. So he gets that, and I think in anticipation of that, you've seen him say to the Associated Press, well, I don't bear responsibility if, in fact, things don't go so super well. It's a tough line to walk, because on the one hand, he's out there at these rallies saying it's a Trump referendum. On the other hand, he's saying, but if we lose, not my problem.
Here's just part of what the president has been saying about the midterms here. Take a listen.
Look, I don't want to make predictions. I know that my poll numbers are terrific, but we have great poll numbers. We have tremendous turnout at these rallies. We have a tremendous, powerful base to the Republican Party. And they have to know that going out for the midterms is very important. It's almost like going out for the 2020 election that's coming up in the not-too-distant future. Isn't that incredible that we're already talking about that?
Hallie, do we know whether the president's pitch, whether his pleas are working just yet?
When it comes to voters getting out there, we just don't know, because he says, a lot of people who are saying, well, you're not on the ballot. Fact check. That's correct. He is technically not on the ballot in 2018, right? But at the same time, you've seen presidents in the past, Barack Obama notably, who've done the same thing and have made midterms in their first cycle, in the first part of their administration, a referendum on themselves. So the question is, what is going to impact voters? I'll tell you this, stuff like the Stormy Daniels tweet, stuff like Elizabeth Warren, I don't know that that's trickling down to folks. I just don't. I think Democrats are making a real push on health care. I think there's local issues that are taking up a lot of the spotlight in these races too. So there's a question of how much the national piece of it is playing into it.
Chris, the president is doing as he has been known to do, crying foul over fake news, this time over this Associated Press interview. The AP headlined a portion of this wide-ranging interview this way: Trump tells AP he won't accept blame if GOP loses House. That was the headline. Trump tweeted, AP headline, very different from my quote and meaning in the story. They just can't help themselves. Fake news. Here is the exchange. You decide, Chris. You decide, viewers and listeners on satellite radio. The AP asks, so my question is, if Republicans were to lose control of the House on November 6th, or a couple of days later, depending on how long it takes to count the votes, do you believe you bear some responsibility for that? There's the question. Trump's response: no, I think I'm helping people. Sounds very much like he's saying he won't be to blame, no?
Well, it's, as you said, it was a wide-ranging interview, and the response was, no, I'm helping people. I think to take that and make that the headline coming out of it is a bit disingenuous as a reflection of the entire story. But having said that, I mean, look, there's only been 3 times since 1900 that the party in power has not lost seats. The biggest loss was in 1922, Warren Harding, 77 seats. And we don't sit around blaming Warren Harding today. We've kind of all forgotten about it. So I think there's a little bit of there's a tale of two houses here, too. There's what's going to happen in the Senate, where Republicans are likely to pick up seats. And it could be 2 to 4 seats. Then there's the House. And I think what you see going on there is a little bit of political Darwinism. There are 92 House candidates that have been outraised. Incumbent Republicans have been outraised by their Democratic opponents. That's a real challenging place to be in, for Republicans to come in and defend these seats whenever the incumbent can't even raise enough money to run their own campaign. And so I think that's a different situation. If you look at Jonathan Allen had a great piece, I think it was last week, in which he showed where the president was going and how the states and how it tied into congressional districts. They're being very strategic with their travel. It's kind of what you went through. And I think from that standpoint, I mean, whenever I see the president goes into a state like Montana, for instance, and it has a big impact on Matt Rosendale's numbers there against John Tester. I was just telling to Betsy earlier, Matt Rosendale will be the senator if President Trump goes to Montana the weekend before the election. I mean, it's like nothing I've seen before. I mean, Obama didn't have that impact, or George W. Bush didn't have that impact. Bill Clinton didn't have that impact. So when he goes into a state or an area,
in certain states, in certain areas. I mean, the president certainly does very well in areas that are not, shall we say, densely populated. He does well, and he's not doing well in Northern Virginia. You're not going to see President Trump at a rally in Arlington.
No, he probably won't go for Barbara Comstock. That probably will not happen. But he is going to Houston next week for Senator Cruz. I mean, he is going to areas that are a little
which I continue to find humorous, by the way, that the president's out there campaigning for Senator Ted Cruz after he spent the better part of, a year and a half giving him
against each other. Yeah, but it didn't stop him. Bernie Sanders goes in and campaigns for people who didn't endorse him.
Well, but none of Bernie's competitors ever implied that his father killed. So not to gang up.
Right, that'd be great.
Betsy, the president insists in that AP interview that he's helping. That was his assertion. Calling a woman horse face. Does that help? Or comparing the situation right now in Saudi Arabia to the situation back here a few weeks ago as it related to Brett Kavanaugh. Does that help?
I think Barbara Comstock was probably not delighted to see the horse face tweet. And this is part of the challenge for Republicans, is that the party itself has such intense divisions. You have some members running for re-election whose constituents love Donald Trump, where he's a huge asset, where him sort of materializing in their district or their state can make a difference. But then you also have a whole bunch of House Republicans running in districts that Hillary Clinton won, in districts where the Democrats might automatically have a 1 or 2 point advantage. Barbara Comstock in Northern Virginia, Carlos Curbelo in Florida, Will Hurd along the border in Texas. These are people for whom Donald Trump is not an asset. And so part of the challenge is that while Trump sounding off in sort of these inflammatory ways may help certain Republicans, for other Republicans it's totally counterproductive.
Dana, this is what the Post, and when I say the Post, especially when I'm in your presence, I'm referring to the Washington Post. This is what the Post cites as one problem for Trump and the Republicans this cycle. Quote, can't be overstated. There is, at the moment, no challenger to Trump. There's no challenger whose husband signed NAFTA. The absence of Hillary Clinton has reset politics in a number of states. How effective is the president without a foil, Dana?
I think that's a very important point, Craig, and that is it is all about Donald Trump now. It's not Donald Trump or an alternative. And, it's part of it's because he's so visible in the interviews and on the campaign trail. But even if he weren't out there at all, they've looked at polling going back to the Great Depression, and there has never been a stronger correlation between your view of the president and your intention of voting for or against Democrats or Republicans in the midterm elections. It's almost a one-for-one correlation. So whatever he's saying on any particular given day probably just reinforces where people are already. But, the truth of the matter is he is going to be credited or blamed regardless of what happens on Election Day and regardless of whether he chooses to accept blame for that.
Let's talk about your former boss, Ted Cruz. He just came up here a second ago. One of the highest profile races that we're watching right now, of course, this race between Senator Cruz and Beto O'Rourke. The big debate was last night. This is just a sampling of the exchanges.
Senator Cruz is not going to be honest with you. He's going to make up positions and votes that I've never held or have ever taken. He's dishonest. It's why the president called him Lying Ted, and it's why the nickname stuck, because it's true.
It's clear Congressman O'Rourke's pollsters have told him to come out on the attack. So if he wants to insult me and call me a liar, that's fine. But, John Adams famously said, facts are stubborn things.
John Adams did say that, by the way. President Trump gave his strong endorsement on Twitter today. But Chris, I mean, we were joking about it, but Lying Ted, it kind of stuck, no?
No, it stuck here. It stuck with the media to some extent, but it didn't stick with Texas voters, and that's why Ted Cruz is going to win by double digits. It's why Beto O'Rourke has now become the most unpopular statewide figure in the state of Texas. You look at his fave-unfave numbers, and they have gotten to where he is upside down in a way that I haven't seen a candidate running statewide in Texas in a long time.
Why is it then that he's been able to raise so much money? Because you're right.
Shows like this talking about him.
But he has trailed in every major poll, but he's outraised.
He is running a campaign appealing to a national liberal fundraising base. In doing so, it's been a suicide vanity mission, which he's making into a suicide/murder because he's cannibalizing other candidates running for office around the country. Particularly, you look at states where they could be competitive, where you're having Heidi Heitkamp is now falling off the map. Claire McCaskill's falling off the map. You've got close races where that money could be going, and O'Rourke was asked, on Tuesday that whether or not he was going to share any of this money with other candidates running for Senate, and he said no, he wasn't. He was keeping it all to himself. And I think that's, the other aspect of this is we talk about it here. Who's running a closer race and a better race than Beto O'Rourke in Texas is John James in Michigan, who was a war hero and somebody who's built an amazing business. When's the last time we had a discussion about that?
I turn now to our chief White House correspondent, not because I'm trying to change the conversation, but I did want to get your take on the debate last night. It was interesting to see Beto O'Rourke, who appeared to be fairly different from the Beto O'Rourke we saw in the first debate.
Yeah, he was more fired up. He was mad. He was getting in it. He was really swinging.
Why? I mean,
because look at the polling numbers. I mean, the polls have been, as has been pointed out, pretty stable here, right? He's down. You say double digits, Chris. That seems optimistic. Well, okay, but I don't see a ton of polling that has reflected that's sort of consistent on that front. That said, he obviously is down. So Jeff Rowe, who I know from covering the Cruz campaign, was like, well, this is what happens when you're down. You come out swinging. I think that O'Rourke could come under some criticism for not being more fired up that first time, and so maybe he's trying to combat that a little bit. But listen, the bottom line is people are talking this, whether you like it or not, Mr. Wilson. This is a race that people are talking about nationally, and I'm pretty sure that O'Rourke did give money to Democratic candidates as well.
And part of the reason there's such a bigger focus on Texas than, for instance, on Michigan is that Ted Cruz is an infinitely larger national figure than incumbent Debbie Stabenow is in Michigan. That's just a fact.
All right, Dana, I don't want you to feel left out, even though you're left out physically.
I'm getting on the Acela next time, Chris.
Really quickly here, one more Trump tweet from the political strategist in chief. Republicans must make the horrendous, weak, and outdated immigration laws and the border a part of the midterms. If that's such a smart idea, why haven't they hopped on board? And why not? I mean, listen, if the president wanted to make the midterms about the economy, be a pretty smart move politically. That's not what he's decided to do.
It is very interesting. If you look around the country, Republicans, particularly in vulnerable races, are not going to immigration. Now, if you look at the polling, it would say they should go with immigration. That can really bring out their supporters. It appears that what they're doing is calculating that will also rile up Latino voters and bring out others. So this has not been a campaign about immigration to the extent that people thought so, which is very surprising given that may be one of the Republicans' most effective campaign strategies, but it does seem to be their concern that it will rile up the other side more.
We didn't get a chance to talk about your fascinating article on Elizabeth Warren, in which I found out that I, too, am Jewish, apparently.
Welcome to the tribe, my friend.
Dana Milbank, thank you. Hallie, thank you. Betsy Woodruff, good to see you. Chris, I hope you'll come back. Thanks as well.